Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's Scrum Masters of the Universe community event. Our speaker today is the author of his recent book, Extraordinarily Badass Agile Coaching, The Journey from Beginner to Mastery and Beyond, but also has authored quite a few other books over the last 20 years. Bob, I am delighted to have you with us. Thank you for coming to share your wisdom with our community today.
Thank you, Mark. It's glad to be here. And Joe, thank you for helping. Hi, everyone. I'm glad you're joining me over in my time. It's lunch. There's something that came in before I start. Let me share my screen. But something came into my email box this morning that I wanted to share with everyone. I listened to a gentleman from the UK. I don't know if he's a coach. I don't know if he's Agile or not. His name is Julian Stodd. He talks about leadership. And in his newsletter this morning, I'm just going to read it to you real quick. He talks about the power of a story. And I thought the universe was conspiring against me or with me this morning when I got this. And he says, we learn from stories. Someone shared a powerful story this morning that I really took to heart. But it's not like swallowing a pill. The learning is something that we do ourselves. It does not come prepackaged within the story. We understand what is given with our own individual context and through our own personal filters of experience, expectation, and culture. Was it just given to you or told to a crowd? Do you think everyone took the same thing away from it? Did it share more confidence of vulnerability, knowledge, or uncertainty? And what did it cost? And did you pass it on? Is something that I think is important. So he was talking this morning about the power to me, of storytelling. The key thing that I hadn't thought about before is I always think of projecting stories, but are you sharing them? Are you transmogrifying them and making them your own and then sharing the stories and cascading them? And that's an interesting idea that I'm noodling around. So let's get going. So this is an Agile Coach's Guide, and let's use the term Agile Coach in this case loosely. Could be Scrum Masters, could be leaders. Actually, I should change it. Could be any Agilista. Guide to Storytelling is where we're going today. Storytellers, I want you all to get some imagery in your minds. And here are some images for me of storytellers. I think in terms of around the campfire. So for me, part of storytelling is gathering a group around a fire and someone telling a story. You can see it in that gray picture, the grayscale picture with, I think, an instructor or a teacher teaching children. And everyone noticed how he is leaning forward and the children are leaning in and they're paying attention. There's an expressive picture there of you. It's not just story by talking or by language. It's story by movement, and you can see the movement. And then I'm a fan. Now, my generation of music, none of you will actually probably know who I'm talking about with the bands that I mentioned. But one storytellers that I'm fond of is Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young. Are a group of acoustic players and will tell stories. And I think they do a great job of that. Other storytellers from a music perspective, Harry Chapin, if you've ever heard, Jim Croce, Bob Dylan is one of my favorite storytellers. When Bob Dylan is singing a song, I'm imagining something. And it's giving me a picture. Tracy Chapman, just before this session, I was listening to Fast Car for some reason at the Grammys. She sang at the Grammys, and I just love that. I love that song, and I love the lyrics, and it takes me on a journey. She takes me on a journey. It's a sad journey. I was every time I listen to that song lately, I cry. So I was getting emotional by listening to that song, the story. And then Billy Joel, the Piano Man. I can almost smell the smoke in the air and the beer, the smells of stale beer by that song. But it's not just those musical storytellers. I think in terms of movie storytellers, of film storytellers. I don't know these are fun from my point of view. They're animated stories. I don't know if you've ever seen Up, anyone, but I remember an emotional connection I had with Up. Storks is the wolves are at the bottom of Storks always makes me laugh. So is anyone resonating with these images from storytelling is imagery? And I want you, when you're telling stories, I want you to put on your artist and try to paint a story. It's an easy, try to visualize, try to create visualization as much as you can. So I wanted to start there and connect you. You've experienced, all of you have experienced wonderful stories in movies, in books, in music. And I want you to go back and start looking at that and thinking about, what did they do? What captured my heart? What captured my soul? What communicated? What were the techniques that they went through? So I want to take just maybe 30 seconds, and I want you all to remember. I want you all to grab a piece of paper and write down a story or two if you can. So remember when a childhood or a family story, a personal story or a professional story, a compelling news story, a movie or a play that grabbed your heart. And I want you to jot down, how did it unfold for you? Not based on the director's intention, but how did it unfold for you? What was its impact on you? And most importantly, how did it make you feel? Everyone, how did it make you feel? So take a few seconds to capture down a compelling, sort of remarkable story from your past. And how did it make you feel? One thing I want to say on this slide, I'm not going to go into it too deeply, but there's academic studies that talk about the impact that storytelling has on the brain. And and I want you to do research on your own. This slide is a beginning part of it. You can just do some searches for that. But the point I'm trying to make is storytelling is an incredibly compelling way of communicating. And historically, for thousands of years, the art of stories, if you look in biblical stories, if you look at any storytelling, is a connection mechanism, and it actually activates parts of the brain. So I want you to think about that from an effectiveness perspective. I want to switch gears a little bit, and I want to talk about storytelling models. Stephen Denning wrote a wonderful book. Don't get caught off by leaders, because I can feel all of you are saying, "Well, I'm not a leader, so the book is not applicable." No, you're all leaders, and A Leader's Guide to Storytelling. And he wrote this in 2005, and I think it's a relatively nice review or overview of effective storytelling. And and I like the notion that he brings up of narrative. So you can say storytelling, or you can bring up your narrating, the notion of narrating. And he talks about narrative patterns. So types of stories, personas of stories. Stories have intent. We're not, now I'm a grandfather. I don't know if any of you have a grandparent, but you know that they tell repeated stories over and over again. That's probably that's probably not what I'm talking about. Like there's the repeated pattern until everyone burns out. So there are patterns, and there's probably anti-patterns like the grandpa pattern. What I'm talking about is having a theme, not just telling any story, but having an intent, having a focus. So he talks about motivating others to action stories. And that's a theme that might, that might focus it. Or building trust in you stories. Let's say you're a Scrum Master and you enter a new team. One of the ways to connect to that team would be to tell stories about building trust in you, explaining who you are. Why should they trust you? Why should they invite you into the team, etc. Building trust in your company. Sometimes there may be distrust in the company or in the culture. Will be another theme. I'm not saying all of these themes or these narrative patterns might be appropriate for you, but some of them might be. Transmit your values would be another useful story for all of you. Stories that transmit your values, your ethics. I grew up on a farm in Pennsylvania, a dairy farm here in the US. And one of the things, if in my era growing up at a farm, is I worked at a very early age. And dairy farmers get up very early to milk the cows. You milk them twice a day. So work ethic is something that I gleaned from that. And I gleaned that there was too much work, so I'm not farming to this day. So there's solid hard work, but then there's overwork, and that shaped me. And I sometimes I share stories about my childhood and farming as a way of connecting with clients, getting others working together. You could talk about team dynamics of people working together. What does good look like? Explain, describing and visualizing what good looks like. Not just saying, read the Scrum Guide. Page 9 of the Scrum Guide tells you what good looks like. That's probably not a good enough story. You could paint a picture of it. Sharing your knowledge stories, not in an ego-driven way, but in a, this is what I've learned this the hard way. I've tried so many different things, and this is what I've learned. Let me share it with you. Your mileage will vary, but can I share it with you? Tame the grapevine, probably not appropriate. And then create and share your vision for the team, your vision for yourself. So I love Denning's view of narratives and having a focus. When you're telling a story, think about, what is my intent? There's the dynamic of the story, but there's the dynamic of your intent, the focus of it. I want everyone to grab a screenshot of this. So right now, grab a screenshot. And I want you, there's a link there, and there's a Steve Jobs video of him doing, and probably a lot of you have seen it, he's doing a commencement address at Stanford University a few years before he passed away. And I consider that video a master class in storytelling. It's about 15 minutes, if I recall. And I want you all to watch it. And I want you all to jot down some of his tools and tactics for storytelling. I think you can learn a ton from that. And I love this quote: the most powerful person in the world is the storyteller. The storyteller sets the vision, values, and agenda of an entire generation to come. Now that's very grandiose, but if you're a product owner, you're doing that for the product. If you're a Scrum Master, you're doing that for your team and for yourself. If you're a leader, you're doing that maybe for your organization or your groups. Whatever, we're setting the tone. It's incredibly important for us to set the tone. And how we do that is, don't use PowerPoint like I'm using. Use story. Use story. And not mural, but story. Again, maybe you have the storyboard on a mural. There's nothing wrong with mural, but I want to talk about some basics of storytelling, if that's okay with everyone. There's just some basic techniques to review, to think about. I want you to weave this into your stories. Take notes, grab screenshots. I want you all to, if you don't think of yourself as a storyteller, you're wrong. We're all storytellers. I want you to refine that skill. It's an effective way of communicating, no matter what your role is. I like the Oreo cookie principle. Anyone ever hear that? Tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. That's an oldie but goodie. It's still very effective. I still find that pattern useful for me to remind me. I think of it as a story arc, beginning, middle, and end of the storytelling is useful. Pareto principle. Try not to, I think there's a mistake sometimes when you're storytelling that you try to communicate your story to everyone. Yes, it would be wonderful if it touched everyone, but try to focus on the middle, the majority. What's the middle persona? I find folks get fractured sometimes. They're trying to tell a story that's going to resonate with everyone, the entire universe. I don't know, well, Scrum Masters of the universe, you have to resonate with the Scrum Masters of the universe, but other universes you may not have to. Connect to your audience. I'm trying to connect to you with body language, with personality. Share goals, clarify and listen. Apply humor if you can. Humor can be incredibly effective in storytelling. Dad jokes. Sometimes I use dad jokes. Sometimes it's effective, sometimes it's not. It depends on the audience. Add situational context, visualization. Let your points emerge. Sometimes folks, they begin with what I want you to I'm telling you a story so that you change, you become more agile. That's probably not the way to begin a story. Talk about a high-performing team that you saw. Describe, why are they high performing? What was the journey they followed to get to that? What were the epiphanies? What were the reflections that they did? And then let people come to their own conclusions about what to learn from that story. Above and beyond, be yourself. One of the mistakes I made early on in my journey as public speaking is there's a consultant, Joanna Rothman, an author consultant, someone I respect deeply. Maybe some of you have heard of her. And early in my career, I tried to be Joanna Rothman in public speaking and in writing. And I figured out very quickly that I am no Joanna Rothman. I am Bob Galen. And I switched from trying to be someone I'm not to trying to find who I am and what is my style. It's important for all of us to find our unique style. Get feedback from folks. See what resonates. Are you, based on your focus for your story, are you seeing people move based on that? Oh, I want to share something with everyone. This is a secret to storytelling effectiveness. How do you know if your stories are being effective, if they're being well received? Anyone, you can put it in chat if you want. Don't come off mute. But one key I found is if people are telling your stories for you. Does that resonate with everyone? Right? I know that I'm telling compelling stories. If I hear someone else repeating my story to others, I'm like, oh, that must have been a good one, because it's worth repeating. It's worth sharing. Now, maybe they took liberty with it, which is fine. Maybe they injected better humor than I did. But that's a wonderful way. The stories they're infectious. They're being shared in the community. This goes back to types and flows. I want you to be conscious about different types and different flows of stories. You can have vision stories. This goes back to Denning's personas or his patterns, his narrative patterns. And I'm extending it a little bit. You can have vision stories, principle stories, values in action stories. What do values in action? Genesis stories. I love Genesis stories. In the beginning, this is how we started a team that ended up doing well. This is how we started a product. We envisioned a product. Let me tell you a story about how we began this product. And I think it was a good beginning. Let me share some of the things we did. Who am I stories? Why am I here stories? Right? Why am I here? Why should you care stories? I know what you're thinking stories. I know what you're thinking. You're all thinking that I'm a dinosaur and not to listen to my stories. That's okay. But whatever, but you could have that. Success and failures. Another archetype that I really like is Phoenix Rising stories. Maybe they're an alternative of Genesis. Everyone know what I mean by Phoenix? We failed. And then this is what we did later, and we recovered. And this is the thing we learned, and this is the success that emerged from it. I just love Phoenix Rising stories whenever they're told. Major turning points, crossroad stories, teaching stories, and the list goes on. Having types of stories, mind yourself for those. You don't want to get stuck in your story. When I write down stories, I keep a repository of story ideas. I call them story snippets. And my snippets, I'll write them down. And they're not very detailed, because what I do is I target them based on my audience, if that makes sense to everyone. Meaning I can have a nugget of an idea, and if I'm sharing it with a Scrum team, I'm going to make it relevant to that Scrum team, and I'm going to target it to that team. If I'm sharing that same story with a CEO, I'm going to retarget that nugget using different language, maybe shift the example a bit so that it resonates with them. It's the same nugget of an idea, but I'm retargeting it. I'll do that when I'm sharing stories when I'm presenting. When I'm at a conference, I'll be reading the audience, and if I need to, I'll slightly shift things based on, is it landing or not? Do I need to shift or not? Do I need to stop talking about Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young because no one knows who they are or not? Do I need to talk about Frank Sinatra, or do I need to talk about someone more modern? So sensing and targeting your audience, embellishing, exaggerating. Someone asked me once, do stories have to be true? And they did this in a conference session, and I'm like, I think so, because I forget the story. If I tell falsehoods, then I won't remember that I lied to I embellished the story too much. So to me, the nuggets have a grain of truth, but I'll embellish them based on the audience. I'll embellish aspects of it. I'll lean into it. I have a tendency to exaggerate. I don't know if you can tell that yet, but I have a tendency to lean in and be passionate, and that works for me. Pausing. Silence is a wonderful part of storytelling. Land an idea and then just sit back and see. Let some time go by. Let some silence. 30 seconds of silence can be a wonderful augmentation of a story. Make your points. If you have something important to say in your story, don't be shy. Many people don't want to repeat themselves. Don't repeat yourselves too often, and don't repeat your stories if you're a grandfather or a grandmother. But if it's an important point, repeat it. You'll see Jobs does that very well in the video. His key points, he lands them, and he'll land them again. And it's clear to you that this is important. And this is what I'm talking about, having your core story snippets. I want you all to consider weaving you into your stories. I'm doing a series of talks talking about coaches and Scrum Masters adding value or showing their value or communicating their value lately. I don't know if some of you may have listened into one of those. But one of the things that I think a lot of Agilists make a mistake is they may do storytelling, but they leave themselves out. Because, well, I'm a servant leader, so the story is not about me, it's about the team. Or the story is not about me, it's about the organization's success. And they're making a huge mistake by leaving themselves out. Now, don't make the entire story about you, but don't leave yourself out. So I want you want to be weaving you into your stories. So your background in history, your essence, your goals and your dreams. What do you dream of? I dream of this team being in this state in a year. Share that. Your professional accomplishments, your business impacts, where it's appropriate in the story. What I'm saying is don't forget the you in your storytelling, particularly in business contexts. It's incredibly important, I think, and a lot of folks miss. They're talking about the we and not the me. Talk about both. I mentioned earlier a story arc. Everyone with me? There's an arc. I think there's an arc to a story. I like chess metaphors. So to me, a nice metaphor for this is opening moves, middle game, and end game. So you're opening the story, you're connecting the story to the landing, to the drop the mic moment, and then there's the drop the mic moment at the ending. So opening moves, those letters in there, it's tell them what you're going to tell them and tell them what you told them. But you can set the space, tell a joke, show vulnerability. Ask a question is a wonderful opening move. Do you all remember, Marcus, do you remember Project Bob Galen? Do you remember how disastrous that was? We started it poorly, right? Joe Miller, do you remember that what happened to you, Joe? You aged 20 years. You're during that project. Oh my God, what happened? So what I'm doing is I'm trying to engage the audience immediately. Ask a relevant story question, and then let it land and see what happens. Try to ask a question that's going to get folks' attention. Lay out a challenge or a threat. We have a threat in front of us, a challenge in front of us, something to solve. Try to make that immediate connection if you can. Middle game is expanding. The middle game is sort of that meat and potatoes, talking about the dynamics, etc. So in a Phoenix Rising story, we talk about the failure in the beginning. Then the middle game is talking about what we're learning, and the end game would be, and what was the final result? We released it successfully. and we generated a lot of interest on our customers, right? Etc. When you close, you want to drop the mic. You want to have a moment at the end, a drop the mic moment. Sometimes people make mistakes in storytelling and they try to tell too much. They have too many threads in their story, if you know what I mean. Too many themes, too many messages. Anyone guess how many messages do you want to have in your story? Anyone guess? Put up a finger. One. Heidi, you're right. I think Heidi, which finger did you give me, Heidi, though? I don't know. So one. Yes, one. Maybe you can maybe stretch it depending on the persona, on the narrative. You maybe could stretch it to two or three, but you need to be artful in being able to manage that. My advice would be have one key theme per story. If you look at Steve Jobs, he had three mini stories. He had a vignette, three vignettes, and one large arc. So you'll see him finessing that. That's fine, but don't try to communicate too much in one story. Have another story. Tell it another time. But land it. Drop the mic. Make your point. Make sure you make the point at the end. This is another version. This is the latest version of the wheel that Mark brought up, and it's slightly different, not very much different, but slightly different than what he was showing. I'm going to talk about storytelling relative to coaching now, and relative to the coaching wheel, and some of the stances or competencies. So now I'm bringing storytelling down to your coaching a little bit, and all of you are coaches. From my point of view, if you're a Scrum Master, you should be developing your coaching skills. Product owner, coaching skills. Manager, leader, director, coaching skills. Coaching skills. So what are some of them? From a self-mastery, the hub of the wheel, the middle of the wheel is self-mastery. It's the stance that all of the other stances or competencies are built upon. It's the foundation. Self-mastery is coaching you first before you coach other people. It's self-awareness. It's you, it's inside out you, then coaching outwardly, making sure that you're walking your talk. So one of the wonderful ways that storytelling, it can complement from a self-mastery perspective, when you're coaching someone else, ask them to tell you stories as a relationship building, as an empathy building exercise. Is everyone hearing me? Ask the first, you meet a Scrum team. Don't start quizzing them about Scrum. Don't start judging them. Not that you would do that, but ask them to tell stories about themselves. Where do you come from? What was your journey? What was your first job like? Tell me about your childhood. What made you who you are as an individual or as a team? What do you do for fun? What keeps you up at night? How can I help you? What can I do to help you? What can I do to serve you, either individually or as a team? And then there's a key to this is you're looking for them to tell you stories. And you want to be leaning in. You want your body language to show curiosity and interest. I'm interested in hearing you. So you're building that relationship. You're building relationship and empathy by not you projecting the stories, but by you inviting others to tell you a story. One of my favorite ways to enter coaching an executive is to ask them to tell me their story. Does that resonate with everyone? What is their story? What's their professional story? Right? Why are you doing what you're doing? And that's not a judgment. I want to know. I am curious. I'm insatiably curious. And I'm trying to figure out, how can I help you? We all said serve. There was a lot of serve the team. How can you serve a team when you don't know what their story is? Figure out their story. Now, another part of it, self-mastery, is connection. And this is you sharing your stories of how you've learned to be effective. How about stories of where you've failed? What you've struggled with? Personal stories of your learning journey. Stories of your why, your purpose. Why are you here? Not because it's your job. I mean, yes, it's my title, it's my job, I was assigned it, I'm in the org chart with you. That's all fine and Jim Dandy. But why look inside yourself? Why are you there to serve that team? It's because I love the teams, because teams are powerful, because they can do incredible things if we get things out of their way. That's why I'm here, right? To see how powerful you can be, to see how high you can fly. I'm here to be the wind beneath. I'm getting a little bit grandiose here, everyone. I'm here to be the wind beneath your wings. That's why I'm here. So you can tell those stories. Mentoring. We can use storytelling in the mentoring. Again, I'm in another competency. Can I tell you a story of my learning journey? Stories of what worked for me and what hasn't. Stories from my own specific mentors. Heidi, I had a mentor. One of the best mentors I had was Ralph Kasuba. Can I share with you a story about what Ralph and my relationship was and how powerful it was to grow me? What was the secret sauce? Let me share that with you. And maybe we can achieve that. I don't know. Stories that map to your mentees' challenges and how we connect. We can tell those stories. What if we're in coaching stance? So instead of asking 1,000 questions, not that there's anything wrong with 1,000 questions, right? Questions are wonderful in coaching stance. But what if I have a ask it, can I tell you a story about describing what professional coaching is and what it isn't? What does that stance look like? I'm literally teaching the client or the person I'm coaching. The first thing I do is try to explain what coaching is, right? I'm trying to meet them. I'm trying to help them to understand what we're about to embark or about creating a well-crafted coaching agenda. Before we create the agenda, I might share a story about a time when I created agenda and how well it worked, and a time when I skipped the agenda and how poorly it worked. And that might be my entry into the agenda. Or a story that explains the power of metaphors and how I would love to explore rich metaphors with my client from a coaching point of view to use as part of our conversations. You can tell stories in advising stance, a story that's similar to your situation, stories that explain or explore options. I love option stories. I've seen this work. Let me share with you a story of this technique and how it unfolded in this situation at this client. Let me share another one. I'm not sure which one of these might work for you, but I've seen these three work incredibly well. Although I've seen this one not work well and this one worked more. What do you think? I'm throwing options on the table. Failure, don't do it. I learned this the hard way. Share a story of a hard failure and explain what happened with that. And this one you didn't rise. This may be a non-Phoenix rising failure story. This could be a crash and burn Phoenix story, and you're sharing that in advising stance. Let me stop there. What I was trying to encourage all of you to do is bring this notion of story. You can generalize it, but if you're now coaching according to the wheel in a well-rounded fashion, look at each one of those stances and ask yourself, can I augment that stance and how I show up with artful storytelling to support my client and to support my coaching? Can I dance around those stances appropriately with stories? Now, I'm not telling you, it's not about you. So please I don't want anyone to say I attended this Scrum Masters of the Universe session with Bob Galen, and he said tell stories, which gave me a license to talk 100% of the time when I'm coaching to talk about. That's not what I'm saying, right? So you're not telling stories constantly. You're looking for opportunities to leverage storytelling as a communication device for you with your clients and your clients with you. That's what I'm inviting you to consider. And as you unfold that and get more expert over time, I think you'll see better results. So we're not going to spend 10 minutes or everything. We don't have a whole lot of time left. I want to keep some time for Q&A if there is any. But what I want to do is I want you to I'm going to give you 5 minutes. Please take this seriously. Remember I talked about creating a snippet library, a story snippet library of little kernels of ideas or stories that you can develop in your storytelling. I want you to take 5 minutes on a piece of paper, electronic, it doesn't matter, and I want you to start compiling your story ideas. And no one better tell me that you have no stories to tell, because I won't accept that story, right? That's an invalid story. You just have to identify. So stories of a team, stories of individuals who did wonderful things, who paired, stories of product owners who took a risk and said no to leaders or said yes and. Stories of leaders who empowered the team, stories of leaders who learned to empower the team, stories of your personal learnings, your failures, your successes, how you've gotten better. So you have 5 minutes for that. If you're looking at the clock, in fact, we're going to go till 51 minutes before the hour. Okay, everyone? So we'll sync to that, 51 minutes. Please create a small backlog of story snippets that you would tell to your boss, that you would tell to your teams, that you would tell to your executives, that you would tell to your peers. Don't forget to weave you into your stories. Weave you into your stories.
Make it personal.
Yes.
5 minutes. Wow, Bob. That was engaging. Thank you.
So when we get to the end of 5, Mark, if you own it, I'm passing the story baton to you, and we can do Q&A if you want, or whatever you want.
Yeah. Just another question, Bob. Would you be able to actually give us the actual PowerPoint so we can
Yes,
share it?
yes, but only if you translate them into Miro will I. That was a joke. I'm just kidding.
I can do that. I can do
No,
that.
no, that was a joke, my friend.
I'm a wizard at Miro. Don't worry.
I'm sure you are.
I was thinking about a story. I don't want to speak too loud such that people can concentrate. You mentioned about farming. When I was 10, my mother actually got me a summer job on a farm. And I had to go down to the farm at 5 o'clock in the morning, go fetch the cows for the farmer with the
Yeah,
dog and the stick, and actually all the cows, bring them to the actual place where they'd be milked, and then let the farmer know that it's time to get up. And that was great. I used to spend all day on the farm shoveling mud. Okay,
mud,
at the age of 10, yeah. Shut up.
shoveling mud amongst other things, my friend.
Yeah.
Yes, yes,
And then go and feed the chickens, feed
yep.
this. And then in September, it was the hay baling. Oh my God. Actually getting all those hay bales and sticking them on the tractor. At 10 years old. Okay, I built a little bit of muscles. But one of the funniest thing that happened to me was actually helping milking. I had to lift up the tail, take a sponge and clean the udders from behind. And then you had to stick them on.
Yep.
Okay, it's great. I got it down to a T. And then one day I just lifted up a tail and I got completely covered.
Exactly. You have to, positioning is key. Timing and positioning is critical.
I was like this.
Exactly, John. So
I covered. So what do I do?
everyone, you have about a minute left or so.
Yeah.
And again, you can go back. So don't measure success by the number. Measure it by you're just creating these ideas, like I say, your central theme, the message you're trying to convey. Sometimes it's very useful to talk about your opening and close. What drop the mic moment are you really aspiring to? That's the key thing. The end game is critical. The way I like to construct stories is clarify my drop the mic, then go back to the beginning and say, how am I going to set the stage for that? Yeah, and just build that. And it's just a few notes to remind you later and observe. I find that we have to really observe to find our story snippets. It's a reflective exercise, is what I'm trying to say, to find those story snippets. They're out there.
Okay, where time is up now, Bob.
Yep.
So
Yep.
maybe people can start thinking about their questions and start throwing in those questions. Joe, did we have any questions up until now? I didn't notice any.
I haven't seen any so far.
You know why, Bob? Because you actually captivated 100 people, and
I
they
don't
didn't
know.
have time. They didn't have time to write a question. So now you have time to write some questions. Did you watch that they wrote down these little backlogs? Did you want them to actually
No.
share anything? It's for
Nope.
them.
That's for them.
Okay, so these backlogs that you've written down are for you. Questions, please. Throw some questions in because we have a hard stop in just over 10 minutes. But yeah, somebody asked me actually personally, why did I actually go on the farm? And it was only actually to get a summer job. Yes, we've got a question. Bob, when you know that someone in front of you is not a story person and instead is a get to the point person, I think the question got cut.
I
Joe.
I can weigh in and say, tell your stories. I mean, I'm not saying ignore that culturally, Joe, and get fired or terminated. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is turn them into a story person, right? Tell the stories. There may be three other people in the room that it is resonating with. If you're one-on-one with someone, if I'm one-on-one with the CEO, I'll still tell stories. Maybe I shorten them, or maybe I target them to things that they really care about. Like if they really care about ROI, then I might target an ROI based story. What I'm trying to say, Joe, is don't allow the culture and individuals to turn your storytelling off. That I think that's a mistake, right? And it's not storytelling; it's communication, clarity of our communication, and we want to activate their brains. So, but you may need to do some intelligent targeting for them. Okay, hope that helps a little bit.
Thank you. And we have another question from Heidi. Do you have a go-to story when presenting?
I don't have a go-to story. I have probably a repository of like 20 or so stories. And if you've attended my presentations and conferences and things, please don't judge me. But I don't have hundreds of stories. I have about 20 stories that I retarget based on the situation. I have a story, for example, of a young man, Mark Riedemann, who I worked with at a company. And Mark came into me one day at the end of a day, and he had a suggestion. I was a director, I was a senior leader of technology, and Mark was leading a database team or a DevOps team. And he came in with this wonderful suggestion that was going to solve a huge problem with the team. And every ounce of my being said, I don't believe it. Mark is full of it. And I don't see it being successful. But instead of saying that, I said, well, what the hell? Why don't I trust Mark and why don't we give it a go? Why don't I trust his ability? And I said that to Mark, and he left. And he came in early the next day, and he was there at like 7 a.m. And I get in early, and he was waiting for me, and he was white-faced and ashen. And he says, Bob, I've been presenting ideas to leaders for 10 years, and no one has taken me up on them. And you're the first one that took me up on it, and actually want to support one of my grand ideas. He's like, are you trying to fire me? What's the point? And I talk about that story about leaders needing to trust. Does that make sense to everyone? Leaders needing to extend trust, leaders needing to empower teams. And I'll shift that. I've used that story with executives. I've used that story with teams. So that was not silly, but that was an example of one of my core stories.
I hope that answers your question, Heidi. Yeah, thank you. I have another question from Suruchi. How to identify the right stance while coaching without sharing stories. Sometimes, she adds something, sometimes coaches are looking for actionable outcomes at the end of coaching sessions. Only story may not be sufficient for them. So the question is how to identify the right stance while coaching without sharing stories.
How to identify, I'm not sure if I understand the question, but I'm going to answer it this way. One of my favorite, so I don't shift stances. I don't recommend shifting stances unbeknownst to your client. So very often when I'm establishing a coaching relationship, I'll explain the wheel to my client, whoever, that could be a team, that could be an individual, could be a group of leaders, whatever. And I'll talk to them about stances. So I'll literally ask their permission or talk to my client in real time about, is my current stance serving you well and serving your agenda, or do we need to make a shift? And so I'm making that we're actually we're collaborating on the stance shifts, and we're focusing on the agenda and the outcome the client was looking for. And I found that to be very useful. I probably do that 90% or more of the time when I'm coaching. So it's not this thing that I'm doing behind the scenes, behind the curtain. It's something I'm dancing with my client, and we're dancing together to achieve their goals. So I don't know if that's a direct answer, but maybe that would be helpful.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, Bob, that is helpful. Thank you.
Partnering, that made me think of partnering, Bob.
Correct.
Partnering with your client. We had a question from a Scrum Master of the Universe person, how the storytelling arc looks like to narrate a concept. For example, a technical concept, a project management concept and strategies. So how does the arc look like?
I don't know. I think that's an exercise for you. Not everything has to be story, everyone. So please don't do that. Please don't go back to your day jobs
just do it.
and just tell stories constantly. It's
the same as just asking questions all the time.
Exactly. Please don't. Please, everyone, listen to me. Let's get this on the recording. But so find those opportunities. I don't know if I've ever told like technical architecture decisions. I'm a historical developer, and I don't know if I use storytelling very much to talk to developers about design choices, about techniques. I just talk about them. I mean, I don't even worry about what coaching stance. We're having a technical conversation. Maybe it's an advisory stance. I think find the opportunities. Now, in the project place, maybe there's a complex project management. Well, then talk about where it was used or how you've used it successfully, or share a story about why it's important, but only based on your experience. So if you can find that in your repertoire, then use it if you think it's effective. If not, just have a conversation.
Beautiful. I'm looking for more questions. One from Dean. Thoughts on...
that's no. We're going to skip that one. I don't want to. I don't want to. I don't want to take that. No. Go ahead. I'm kidding.
I think Dean feels a little bit left out all of a sudden.
No. Dean. I'm sure he feels a little loved.
We have 2 minutes left. Thoughts on making stand-ups more valuable by telling snippets of the customer's journey? What are your thoughts?
I love that. So Dean, years ago, I used to call them soapbox moments, and I would, as a Scrum Master, I would in a 15-minute daily Scrum or stand-up, I would take, if there was time, I would take 2 or 3 minutes to jump up on a virtual soapbox and share something. It could be something about estimation and remind the team. So sometimes it was mentoring or teaching. Sometimes it was trying to share an idea from a customer or a persona, or what was the goal we were trying to achieve from a customer? What was the problem? What was the customer's problem? And I would share stories as much as I could share stories around that. I think those soapbox moments were almost in every stand-up. And the feedback I got from the team is it was helping guide the team in a very, very condensed way. It was very valuable to the team. Sometimes I was reminding them of something they forgot, right? It's a like what is the purpose of the retro, and what's the key purpose? But a lot of them were around customers and the why, etc. So I think it's applicable.
Okay, we've got time for one more question, Bob, if you're okay. We've got
Sure.
1 minute to go exactly. Last question I'm going to ask is from Julia. Can I use storytelling when I'm moderating the events, or should I do it in a coaching, mentoring meeting with the team? What are your
Both.
thoughts on that? Both.
I mean, again, Julia, I think both. I think about, I want you all to sort of reflect back to storytelling events that you've been a part of, that you've received in a large meeting. Has someone told a story that resonated with you? It was effective. So maybe you could find opportunities for that. Have you experienced it in a team meeting? I have. What's appropriate? What are appropriate conditions for that? I use them in one-on-one coaching. What would be appropriate conditions for that? And look for those opportunities. The other thing I want to leave with everyone is I think you have to work at storytelling over time, right? So it's not something you're going to master in a week or two. It's something that I'm just asking you to start working on and be very diligent with it. And what I think you'll find is over time, your communication and the impact improves. So it's something you make it a habit and diligently work on it and practice. And maybe safely practice with your teams, and we'll leave it at that.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah, of course you can.
Permission. If you have an opportunity to share a story, ask permission. Can I share a story? And if the people say yes, there's your opening.
Yep. Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate all of your time.
We have a hard stop. Thank you, Bob. That was absolutely wonderful. Thank you, Bob, for coming. And we see you again in a couple of months' time. Thank you, everybody in the community. Really appreciate you being here. This was an amazing opportunity. And thank you. And we appreciate you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye.